Welcome everyone to today's forum. I'm joining you from the traditional lands of the Ngunnawal people, and I'd like to acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose traditional lands and airwaves we all meet. Pay my respects to elders past and present. Today I'm joined by several senior members of the university, including Paul Duldig, our Chief Operating Officer, Anna Sikoris, our Chief Finance Officer, and Nadine White, the Director of Human Resources. And before I start this forum, I'd like to run through just a few housekeeping items, which is everyone has their videos and microphones switched off, and that helps keep the sound and picture clear, quality clear. And if you would like to ask a question, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. This forum is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please email your question to vc.events@anu.edu.au, and there it can be asked anonymously. So welcome everyone, and today I wanted to talk to you about the ANU recovery plan. So we're gonna quickly show some slides to explain some things. I'm a very visual person, and I want things as we describe what is going to be a fairly somber conversation. I wanted to give a chance for you to absorb it and have a chance to ask a bunch of questions, but I recognize that this is the beginning of your questions, and we'll have ample time in the weeks to come to answer questions as they arise. So if we could show the first slide, that would be great. Next slide, please. I think right at the core, I want us to remember that our mission as Australia's national university is right now as important as it was when we were founded in 1946. And as the national university, we have committed to provide in Australia a transformational student experience equal to the world's best and at a human scale of our campus. That cannot change because that is what is going to make us the university that the nation needs. We want our student cohort to continue to be diverse and reflective of the nation, even more so. And that means including students from our region and around the world. And we want to meet our national responsibilities through a renewed compact with Australia and make sure that we are the national university. Australia is going to have to rebuild during this COVID-19 pandemic crisis that's affecting us and affecting the nation, the region, and the world. And we are going to be a partner in that, a partner that the nation needs. And we're going to do that by conducting and doing the research that transforms society and creates the national capability and allows us to educate students who are going to solve the problems that face the world with that knowledge. And as a university, it is absolutely essential that we remain a great place to work, a place that is equitable, that is inclusive, and that is the first choice for talented students to come, but also for academics and professional staff to work and to do this really important mission that we all have. Next slide, please. The fundamental challenge we have from COVID-19 is not a one-off problem. We have had a lot of one-off expenses this year to deal with the pandemic, but it has foundationally changed the future outlook we have for the number of students that we are able to recruit, mainly overseas. So this is a graph that shows the total student number. EFSL is a full-time student. And you can see that while our domestic student load, a little down this year, is expected to recover, the international student load is going back almost 5 years into the past. And as I think everyone is aware, that a large amount of the university's revenue is derived from international student fees. They're a really important part of our community and well beyond financially, but the reality is they're also an important part of the financial foundations of the university. Next slide. We seem to have lost our slide. Next slide. So if we could go back. One slide. We need a recovery plan. The founding mission of that university remains absolutely essential. But to do this, we need to be financially sustainable. And because this is a systemic shift to the future, it's not a one-off. It is something where the ground has literally changed below us for the foreseeable future. And that ground basically takes us back to our pre-2017 self. That means that we are going to have to adjust to that new level. The significant uncertainty that we see from this seismic shift of essentially how we're funded is not going to go away in the near term. The financial bottom line of the recovery plan is that we have a financial gap of $103.5 million per year starting next year. And this is going to require savings and non-salary expenditure of a further reduction of 215 positions. And that is a lot of people within a small community like our own. Next slide. So expenditure needs to be reduced because it is essential that our expenditure reflects the reality of the reductions in our revenue for the years ahead. We started in 2020 in a very strong fiscal position. And I'll be honest, a year ago, I just cannot imagine the state we are in now. But we know that in order to deliver on our mission, we cannot just squeeze and expect to come out the end a university that can deliver its mission. We must be the excellent university that we know Australia needs. We have had almost, not quite yet, 250 voluntary separations thus far. And as people have separated from the university, we are going to need to bring new people in, not so much to fill people who have decided to separate in the non-academic side, so much as changing the roles and how we deliver services, for example. But also we do have long-term members of the academic staff, and we have a chance for renewal of those positions with a new cohort of young people. That is, the university needs to remain a vibrant version of its current self. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, $103.5 million savings is required. And in order to achieve that amount of savings, our estimate is that we need to save 215 positions worth of expenditure. We are doing lots of things on the non-salary side. And indeed, we're taking off more from the non-salary side than on the salary side. We are limiting the consultancies and contractors. We know we're limiting travel. We are investing in things like greenhouse gas emission reduction methods because it saves us money long-term, as well as meeting our causes around the environmental future of the world. And we can look at a whole range of other activities that we can look at in detail in the weeks, months, and years ahead. We also want to be able to support the flexible working arrangements that we've all grown to love and hate, because many of us are going to benefit from these in the future. And that means we'll have a smaller work footprint and ultimately smaller greenhouse gas emissions from that aspect of our work going forward. Earlier this year, we asked people if they were interested in having a pay rise deferral, and narrowly this was passed, saving the university $13.5 million in payroll for next year. And this equates to about 90 positions saved, up to 90 positions saved. So we can account that every one of those dollars we saved in payroll is going towards making sure we are able to keep more people on salary. With respect to staff reductions, the 215 positions, voluntary separations remain our preferred method. But there will be natural attrition, people retiring, permanent transfer into other positions or to other organizations. We, of course, want to be able to redeploy people because, as I said, the university's mission is going to change a little bit because of the foundational change caused by COVID-19. There will be some people who are interested in doing voluntary conversion to part-time work. We have the ability to enter in, as we have been, in fixed term and pre-retirement agreements. We have people who will not be filling recruitments that they had intended to do to help save money. And at the last resort, we have forced redundancies. Next slide. We will borrow for all of the transition costs and our capital expenditure, because those are things that we know it makes more sense to borrow against. What we're not going to borrow for is operating at a deficit, just the foundational operations of the university, because that is not sustainable. So within our capital expenditure, we have building expenditure. We have 3 existing construction projects underway, which it makes sense to complete, and we will borrow to complete those. We have safety and maintenance throughout the campus, and we must continue to do that. But there will be no new buildings or refurbishments for the foreseeable future or in the near-term future. We also have some technology capital, which we believe needs to continue. We have the opportunity to improve our systems, to make them better, more reliable, but also to save money by making them more efficient and to stop duplication that occurs. And I think we're all aware of some of the deficiencies that we face every day in those systems. We also have the need of some limited cyber investment. We've done a fair bit so far to keep us safe, because that is an ongoing issue, and it really is not dissimilar to the safety and maintenance of our buildings, and it is required to make us safe. Next slide. I want us to think that this is not just cutting. We do need to grow our revenue in the future, and we will be actively pursuing that. It's going to take a couple years, but a lot of our vibrant future is going to come from what we're able to do on this. And so we will be actively investing in rebuilding our student numbers, at growing business development and commercialization of research. We'll be investing in philanthropy and in our efforts to work with government and other sources of funding. So we will be consulting, and one of the things over the next several weeks I would like to hear from you are ways that we could do this better. Because if we do this, not all money is equal, because what we want is money that allows us to, as a university, to do our mission well, and that serves the staff and the students of this university well. And there are many opportunities to do this, but it will take time. But it is an important part of our recovery plan. Next slide. So the ANU recovery plan has a consultation period starting today and continuing to the 29th of September 2020. As always, I want, and I have told my executive and the deans, we want to be as transparent as possible, and we want to listen to the ideas and concerns that are expressed by the community. This is a genuine consultation, and so I really do want people to engage. The outcome of the consultation and change management proposals are planning to be released the week of the 5th of October 2020. We will note that the budget of the government is the 6th of October, and we want to make sure that we're able to bring in every piece of information that we have in case that there are any positive announcements within the government. I have reason to believe there might be some, but I have no assured knowledge that there will be. And so we want to be able to incorporate that in any final change management proposals that we make. Next slide. So we have some key contacts that are up there. And I just want people, and we should share these hopefully through the various documents, but ANU recovery at anu.edu.au at the bottom is a place where we can have comments and feedback. And as I said, if you have ideas, don't assume that we have thought of everything. This has been an intense period for me and my staff with a lot to think about, but we are not the only place that has knowledge. And that's why this consultation period is so important. We also note that we have a staff advisor up there to provide help if you're feeling duress from these things, as well as people who can provide expert advice as well through the employee assistant provider. So in summary, I really do want people to engage in what comes next, but I do think we need to think very carefully about the role of this institution going forward. It is absolutely essential that we deal with the hardships that COVID-19 has thrown to us as an institution and to rebound. I know what we have talked about today is a lot to digest. I know it is dispiriting. And I do thank everyone here, because as an institution, our ability to deal with COVID-19 so that our students and our research have had the maximum impact. We've had the ability to really, I think, deliver for our students in a way that many institutions have been unable to do. And that has been to everyone's commitment. And in this time of uncertainty, I am asking for you to keep that commitment up. And I know it is hard, because it is absolutely essential for our students and for the nation that we continue on our absolutely essential mission. None of us wanted to be doing this this year. It is incredibly stressful for everyone. So I do ask for people to have compassion, not just to my staff, but to each other, because it will be hard for many of us to deal with the uncertainty. Each of us has to take care of ourselves, and that includes myself, making sure that I take time off to deal with the stresses of this, but each of us has to do that. So again, please look after people around you and check in to make sure that they're dealing with this. I am asking everyone to be careful about how we communicate with each other. In these times of duress, it is very easy for our messages to get scrambled. We are all on the same team, and we are all, as a community, working to ensure that we can do the best we can for our students and the world going forward. There are going to be lots of online resources available, including our HR team, who are there to provide advice and who can provide support as well. So our consultation launches today. It will last, as I said, for the next several weeks, and you will have the chance, as I said, for us to answer the questions as best as we can. And I really do want to make it clear that we do want to hear from you. So we're going to have a chance now to open up Q&A. I thank everyone for their patience this year. I look forward to your help in getting through this incredibly challenging part of our university's life. It is certainly true that the university has never faced an economic shock like this in its history. I'm continuing to advocate outside the university for what we do and our mission. And I don't have anything yet to report, but from everyone from business to philanthropy to government, I can see that people realize that we need to be there by their side going forward. And so I hope that that will deliver things over the coming year. And so, as I said, in the future, we will have a chance to meet under hopefully happier circumstances, but I look forward to working with each of you to get through this tough time. So I'd like now to open the floor to questions, and my team will help me answer them as they are, there's some expert knowledge that is not entirely in my head. So moving to the first Q&A, I'm going to start off with the first question, which is from an anonymous attendee. The university has had a lot of experienced and dedicated staff take up voluntary separations recently. And my two-part question is, has the anticipated target been reached? And how much is the university expected to save in salaries in the next few years? So this has been a very uncertain year. And so our voluntary separations were made because we knew we had a large mountain to climb. And as indicated today, we have not reached that mountain, but we have gotten a very long ways there. If you think between the almost 250 voluntary separations made and the almost 90 avoided separations needed by our salary deferral, we are well over halfway. And so it has been important. But the final benchmark that we have to reach is that 215 additional separations and redundancies. That is done essentially to make us financially viable going forward. I guess, Anna, do you want to add anything beyond that from the CFO perspective?
No, I don't think there's anything beyond that. I think that you've explained that. Thanks, BC.
Next question. Further to your invitation to submit a question or questions to the VC forum, my question is, why did we receive the invitation to such an important meeting less than 24 hours beforehand? As a union delegate, I would have liked to canvass members in my school on questions that they could ask of the VC in the recovery plan process, which I might have submitted to your email address for consideration on their behalf. The short notice does not give me sufficient time to engage in this dialogue about current conditions that we very much need. It's prohibitive of such dialogue. The manner of communication is undemocratic and disrespectful. Regrettably, no lessons appear to be learned from the EA variation process. So today is the beginning of a 2-week consultation period. And we had a council meeting yesterday, which has essentially adopted the financial recovery process. And my desire was to get that information to our community as fast as possible. I could have waited several days before having our first meeting, but today is the first of a 2-week process. So I want to make it clear that you will have lots of time to engage, where we can do it on an item-by-item basis with experts in the room so we can really answer your question. This is the beginning of an information process. It is not meant to restrict the conversation going forward. I guess with respect to a conversation, let's see, with regards to measures implemented to create, sorry, we've just rearranged everything. With regards to measures implemented to create immediate financial savings, termination of casual employment, non-renewal of fixed term employment, and higher restrictions in particular, could the ANU provide details about third-party contractors and consultants providing administrative roles? And there's a whole range of things here that are quite specific. And I guess what I would prefer to do is just to provide a written set of things. Anna, I don't know how much information you have directly at hand on some of these things. Some of these things go back to 2019 and 2020. I will just say that I have made it a clear expectation that we, for example, do limit our third-party contractors and consultants, and we have been doing so at a pretty strong rate in the second half of this year, noting that we have had very specific things around COVID-19 where we have need to bring in experts, very specific activities. Anna, do you have specific information?
Yeah, I can give you the specific numbers in terms of consultants and contractors spent last year and year to date. So last year we spent $70 million on consultants and contractors, and year to date we have spent $43 million. But as you said, Brian, we expect the second half to be at a lower run rate than the first half was.
Yeah, at a substantially run rate. And I think within those consultancies, there are things like internal auditors that we absolutely have to have as a consultant legally, and a very significant fraction of things are of that note. The next question is, when will staff return to campus? So I guess most staff will have returned to campus within the COVID-19 framework. It is very much some local conditions that prevail. Paul, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
So thanks, Brian. So right now, staff are allowed to return to campus based on the return to campus plans that have been developed by each college portfolio and school. And so that really is a matter for the local area to have gone through and done the risk assessments around how to maintain social distancing, how to maintain COVID safe behaviours and practice. So There's no university-wide prohibition. It's basically a area by area consideration.
Thank you. The next question is, why are we not talking about how to increase our international enrollments? There are plenty of people around the world who would pay full fees to attend the ANU. I understand borders are currently closed. Why aren't we lobbying government to remedy this? All right, so the first thing is I just did get out of a meeting with the education minister specifically indicating that we need to find a way to open borders in a safe way for the future. And indeed, having a plan into next year that allows us to do that is important, as are, for example, visa terms and conditions. And I can assure you, I've had multiple meetings with multiple ministers on this front. I think it is a complicated situation that cuts across just the entire federation right now. And I think you will find that the Prime Minister is quite cross about this in the interactions with the states, but it is a non-trivial exercise to fix. With respect to increasing our international enrollments, I can assure you we are actually investing considerable resources to try to increase our international enrollments. As you have seen, we are well below the nominal size of the university, several thousand people. So we are working to do that. With respect to, there are plenty of people around the world who would pay full fees to attend the ANU. I'm sorry to say that the number of people who are able to pay full fees to attend the ANU and successfully work within our environment from an academic level is actually a very challenging market. And it's a market that everyone around the world is actively competing us against. So we are doing everything we can, but let me tell you, it is going to require every one of us to work to really be part of getting students to come here in this challenging time, remembering that the world has had a huge economic shock and the amount of disposable income that people have to travel internationally has been limited a lot. So we're looking at all sorts of clever ways that we can do this in new ways to make it better. But we do want to have people who come here who are able to thrive and be part of our community. That is absolutely essential. And so we are working to get those students here. When will the aggregate financial data be made available to staff to assess for themselves the current and likely future status of the university? So Anna, perhaps you and Paul can discuss the financial data to be, how we're going to be releasing that.
Okay, Paul, would you like to go or would you like me to?
I'll make a start. And also, I've just quickly scrolled through some of the other questions, and there's probably a couple that we can answer that are along similar lines.
Yes. Okay.
So this may be helpful. So at 2:30, the recovery website will go live, and that will contain a detailed change proposal. So we're not expecting you clearly to have read that for this meeting today. This is really the announcement and staff forum, and there's going to be lots of other opportunities for feedback and seeking further information. In the detailed change proposal, the financial information is also provided, and also the change process that we will be putting in place. So that explains the university-wide strategy, the assumptions that have been made, and the details of, particularly on the financial side, how that all fits together. So some people on the chat have asked, what are we actually consulting on? And what we're consulting on is that document that is a detailed formal document for your consideration. And if people have specific questions that they want, I think later in the chat, there's some quite detailed questions around cash and student numbers and so forth. We can also work through those questions. We'll capture all of these questions from the Q&A. We have already prepared some expected questions and answers, and we'll keep filling those out on the website. So to the extent that those answers are available, we'll certainly be providing those as well over the next 2 weeks.
All right. So there are some reasonably specific questions. So the aggregate financial data We still haven't really covered off on that.
We will have, Brian, as Paul said, we will have data that's in the information available this afternoon, but if there is a request for further detail beyond that, I think just reach out and we will share what we can.
That's right. And I should say, when it comes to how much money the university spends on various line items, the answer is a lot less than we have in the past, but we do need to make some expenditure in areas that we to function. And no one, just to be clear, no one on my team likes redundancies. We hate them. We absolutely hate them. And we're doing everything we can to limit them to the smallest amount. One of the questions here is, why does the university not borrow more money rather than fire staff in the short term? And I did try to indicate that we have a systemic long-term change in our finances, and borrowing money when you're actually not making enough money just to even cover your basic outgoings means you're in an unsustainable position. And so council has essentially directed us to be able to borrow money for transition costs and for long-term items like capital, but we do have to manage our ins and outs because we do not see any long-term changing of that basis. And so it's just simply not sustainable to add money or to borrow money for what is essentially spending more than we earn in our salaries and just the basic running costs of the university. Question, can you comment on the rationale of completing the capital works underway and whether this is consistent with our strategy of reducing our footprint and moving to flexible working conditions? Who is going to be sitting in these buildings if most of our activities are going online? So Paul, I'm going to start and then I'll hand this off to you. But I think that we do have the opportunity to move some of our activities online, but we will continue to be a university that occupies this campus with more flexible working conditions. But I do expect that people will be actively engaging with the campus over time. Our students are expecting that. And it is part of the academic community that makes a university like ANU the university that it is. So I don't see that changing. Having a half completed part of the university where for example, physics is a good example. The physicists need that building to be completed because we've torn down a good fraction of their existing building, and their labs and things need to be completed. And leaving that half done will leave physics completely undone for the years to come. And that is an example of why you wouldn't leave, for example, physics half completed. Paul, would you like to further comment on that?
Sure. So we have gone through the capital plan very closely, and the three construction projects that are underway that will be continuing are, as Brian mentioned, physics, Birch and Coombs. The nature of the question that's been asked relates to the footprint and also the environmental footprint. Those three buildings are actually more environmentally sound than the buildings that they're either replacing or refurbishing, and also more efficient from a space layout. So they actually add to the efficiency of the overall campus. And as Brian said, they're very important that they're finished. But it does allow, with the possibility of a reduced footprint post-COVID, for us to reconsider some of the other buildings on campus that are less efficient, both from a greenhouse gas or layout perspective. And we may be able to reduce their usage or use them for other purposes. So there are some opportunities on campus to be much more efficient, absolutely.
The next question is the lapsing of fixed contracts already taken into account before the extra 215 cuts? Many of the enthusiastic up-and-coming academics are in fixed-term contracts that will finish this year or in the next 2 to 3 years. Given that you want a renewal of staff, these are easy cuts that will actually hurt the university more because we will lose good people rather than having hard conversations with those who are perhaps close to retirement and acting that way. So it is it's a complicated cancer to answer, but I think we understand exactly the problem that you are referring to. When our discussions are within the service divisions as well as within the colleges, we've made it very clear that we're not just trying to prune to the budget and not think about the future. We have to be thinking about renewal. We have to be thinking of what we're doing and not doing, and we have to be building a runway so that we can include ECRs into the future. But I will also tell you that as part of that plan means actually recruiting the international students, the domestic students, getting the business development up and going, philanthropy up and going, and me successfully working with government to make sure they continue to invest in us. So we are not interested in just making easy cuts to where we just cut out the future of the university. Exactly not the approach we want to take. We really need to think about the university we want to be for the future and make a commitment now. Since we have to make these adjustments now, we want to make sure that the university is fit for purpose going forward. That has to be a focus, the future, and everything we do will be through that lens. Nadine, do you want to provide any other information on that?
No, Brian, I think you've answered that question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's a request, there's a bunch of very specific questions on the budget papers and annual report. So I have been doing everything I can to release the 2019 annual report. I cannot release it until it's tabled in Parliament, and I am looking for ways to get an exemption that I can provide it to you. I made a direct representation to the minister and the department on this several times, including yesterday. So as soon as I'm allowed to do that, I will do my best to get it to you. I've just been told we have the exemption for certain funds. And so I guess my ask yesterday has fallen on fallow ground. And so we will be releasing what we're allowed to immediately. With respect to enrollments and our figures and projections, the underpinning projections I think are reasonable to share as a part of our transparency. And how do they compare to last year? Well, I showed you on that diagram. Domestic looks pretty solid, but international is down by a considerable amount, in excess of 30, probably close to 40% from memory. So we are happy to be transparent in what we think is coming. That is, of course, necessary to make sure we can run the university possible. With respect to the cash goal, more details on the recommendation of a 250 million cash position at the end of this year. What is the normal cash position for ANU finishes each year with? So that last one, the answer is a lot more than $250 million. And Anna, maybe you can provide a little bit of detail on that.
Sure. So I think now that we have that live approval to release the numbers, I can comment. So 2018, we ended with 566 million, and 2019, we ended with 440 million. And in terms of the thinking behind the 250 million that we would like to end this year with, that is to cover us for about 3 months of operational expenses, so that we don't end in a position that if we have more uncertainty and our revenue drops, that we do actually have enough money to get us by the next few months. So the 250 is the equivalent to 3 months operational expenses.
And the reason this is important is imagine a geopolitical shock of some description. The university would literally be having to fire, staff en masse, almost everyone, to deal with that type of geopolitical shock. And that is just simply not a tenable position for council to have us in. With respect to the surplus or deficit, does the ANU executive project an operating surplus or deficit at the end of year? It's a very big deficit, and Anna, maybe you can provide some shape on that.
Yeah, so at the end of this year, we do expect a deficit that's greater than $200 million. That takes into account already the expenditure control framework reductions that have been done for this year. And even with what we are projecting going forward, even with the further reductions that we have announced now today, we still see that for the next 3 years, so 21, 22, 23, we will still remain in a deficit position for each of those years.
And that is essentially it's with that, that's essentially with no new capital expenditure at all, and it's borrowing against even maintenance and things like that. So it's not a long-term tenable position, but I am confident that we will be able to slowly raise revenue through the things that we have talked about. Financial assets and options. Can you detail the composition of the university's financial assets, including information around if assets are legally tied? And we will have specific information. We did detail that early on, and we will be providing that as a detailed set of considerations. All right, Rachel asked, the initial tutored plan for July to trial bringing back international students was postponed because of the risks associated with Victoria's second wave of COVID. Are there plans to revisit this trial, begin a pathway to rebuild our international student base? Why isn't this explicitly discussed as part of the plan? So Rachel, the answer is it's a very fluid environment, but yes, we are looking at any opportunity by which we can do that. And indeed, as a sector, I think we're looking as a sector about how we can figure out ways to do this, not as a pilot, but rather en masse. You will note that we need to have cooperation of the local government to do this, and that is in caretaker mode right now because of an election. But it was clear that there was there wasn't a willingness to do it right now. While Victoria remains in lockdown, we do have a lot of students in Victoria, and I think we need to figure out ways to get them here at the same time as we look at our international students. So it's not explicitly discussed as part of the plan because it is covered by essentially the looking at how to attract international students. So it comes under that, and it is one strategy by which we're working to do that. Hi, Brian. Just to clarify, are you announcing 215 forced redundancies? And if so, are these continuing positions? So the answer is no, we're not announcing. We are consulting on that being the need. And Nadine, would you like to maybe use the correct language, because I want to make sure we get this correct. But it is 215, not necessarily forced redundancy. It's 215 additional positions. But Nadine, why don't you say it exactly as it needs to be said?
Thanks, Brian. You are correct. We're looking to find savings which equates to another 215 positions across campus. That can include continuing positions. It could include non-renewal of a further fixed-term contract. So there are a number of options for us to look at. But we're also looking for your feedback as members of the community on other options that you think would be reasonable for us to take to look at those, saving that amount of money through salary savings. Now, there are options. We're interested in hearing from you to understand where you might think that we should put our efforts. And we're also looking at a range of other options that many staff members have already raised with us. We will keep the voluntary separation arrangements that we have in place at the moment, and we'll keep those going so that if there are staff who are still interested in departing or retiring from the university, that we can have conversations around those. Our preference is to look at as many voluntary separations as we can so that we are not looking at redundancies. Thanks, Brian.
Lucy asked the following question: will you be increasing the domestic student numbers offered positions next year? The answer is yes. We had a record number of people apply and record number of offers, and the first round of acceptances have come back and they're well up on last year. But I do want to caution you that the way that undergraduates are, which is what this is, are funded, there is a cap of how much the federal government spends. And so taking on large numbers of domestic students, I think, is a good thing to do for the nation right now. And it does help make sure the university has the size that it should, but it does not increase revenue as fast as you might like due to the policy constraints by the federal government. So we will continue to try to be a great place for domestic students who want to come here to come. And I think we will see an increase. Another place we need to be looking at is increasing our offerings in the postgraduate or executive education areas, because there are a bunch of people who need that type of education, and our expertise, that's one of the ways that we can connect what we do as ANU into the workplace in a very quick way. And so that is a place where there is no federal funding, but there is ability for people to use HECS, for example, for master's degrees, for example, to enter that market. And some of these novel new degrees that have been announced over the last couple of years. Rachel Ball asked, are there 215 job losses? Is that the net figure, i.e. after voluntary separations and additional positions filled? Rachel, that's no, and I'm going to have Paul discuss this as it's a little tricky.
Thanks, Brian. And also, I've just gone forward and looked at a couple of other of the questions that are along similar lines. So if I could just explain how the numbers come together, and you'll see this in the paper at 2:30. So as Brian mentioned earlier, the additional savings task that we have is $103.5 million. And as Anna mentioned, that still does actually leave us in deficit next year, but it leaves us in deficit to the tune of our restructuring costs and our depreciation. And we think that's a sensible target. To go for a surplus next year just would be completely unrealistic. So of that 103.5 million, normally our salaries run at around about 60%, but again, we're trying to limit the impact on salaries. So we're assuming a 50% contribution from positions and the staffing profile towards that $103.5 million saving. As Brian mentioned earlier, and as in the paper, so far this year, we're estimating we're going to have close to 250 staff having accepted a voluntary separation package, and that achieves around about $35 million. But it's not realistic to model that there won't be additional positions. Some of those positions, as Brian mentioned, will be in areas where there is academic renewal. Some might be where it's that staff have accepted a voluntary redundancy, but there is a need for a smaller number of people to replace those that have left. So the 250 voluntary separations, there will be some additional positions coming on board. So our modelling is that there's a further 215 positions gross needed, and that once you remove the additional positions that will come on board, the net figure over the 2 years is 325, and that equates to the 50% of the 103.5. I'm sorry to throw all these numbers at you, but they are in the paper. But essentially, we thought it was honest with you to talk about the gross figure, which is the 250 and the 215, but the net is 325. So we have allowed for some additional positions to come on stream between now and the end of next year. The other thing that we've allowed for is a transition period as well. We're not expecting that from the 1st of January, the university will have achieved the reduced expenditure level. So we have assumed that there's a quarter of the cost savings actually will be incurred next year and then won't be in 2022 and 2023. So again, apologies for throwing lots of numbers at you, but that's how it all hangs together.
All right, thank you. And so a number of people's questions have been answered there, and I think Craig's question has been there. Brett says, as people separate from the university, there will be a significant loss to institutional knowledge, including expertise in our key missions in teaching and research. And I agree, and that's why the renewal that Paul just talked about is important on one side, but it's also why ANU endeavors to provide, for example, for emeritus professors, excellent conditions so they can remain connected to the university and continue to provide at least some of the things, if not all, some choose to do, of their external bits. So it is a big shock, and we are trying to make sure that, as I said, what we choose to do is we do it well, and we don't just hollow out the university. We are choosing as best we can to make sure we continue to have critical mass in those areas that we keep doing. The next question is, if each of us took 1 week of unpaid leave, what would the impact be? So I think that's an interesting question. It's perhaps, Paul, you would like to answer that.
So thank you. We have thought about the various options that have been put forward and accepted in some universities around leave. The option for people to take unpaid leave is possible now, and certainly it was something that some people indicated they would be keen or willing to offer when we did the last round of consultation. So that's certainly not to be prevented as an option for people. The issue that we have is the size of the structural gap is so large that we don't think that there'll be enough people taking that up to avoid the kinds of staffing position reductions that we're talking about here. But nevertheless, in each team, if there are more flexible ways of working, unpaid leave that some people might want to take up, they will all help. They will all absolutely help to reducing the salary bill. And those things are possible now and can absolutely be taken into account as each area goes through their budgets for 2021 through to 2023.
The next question is, for people on fixed term contracts, can arguments be made for extending these contracts, or are these also frozen? We have flexibility, and Nadine, maybe you've been talking about some of the things we're looking at doing to ensure we don't have a lost generation of researchers.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. Right now, colleges and portfolios can actually make requests to extend fixed-term contracts. There's approval processes to go through, but if you have requests, then I would encourage you to talk to your director, dean, or portfolio head around those. There will need to be a justification, obviously, to support that, but it's not impossible. They're just being scrutinised in a significant amount of detail, and I understand that involves some additional time and consideration for what's involved, but we do need to go through that because they're serious decisions that we need to make if we are extending or concluding someone's fixed term contract. So that's the first part of the answer. We're actively working with the NTU on job security measures, and that's really quite important. And I know there are a number of questions in the chat Q&A forum today around what about casuals and what about fixed term contracts ending. So we are looking at 2 pilot programs with that we're co-designing with the NTU. The first one would be around if staff members conclude their fixed term contract, providing those staff members with access to internally advertised jobs, so that even if your contract has concluded for a set period of time, we would be able to give you access to those internally advertised positions. So you would still remain a member of the community and we wouldn't lose expertise, and you would still have access to jobs as we look at recruitment in the future. The second pilot that we're co-designing with the NTU is around trying to improve job security for casual sessionals within 2021 and beyond. So we'd like to effectively, using Brian's language, reconceptualise casual work. So we need to start looking at how we might do that to give security across the course of the year, not just on our 13-week semester basis. So all options are open in terms of that pilot, and we will be bringing in NTU representatives and members of the university community to provide advice and support on how we design that. I don't know what it's going to look like yet, so I don't want to make any promises around what it does look like, but the incentive incentives there are to make sure that there is improved job security. We have commitment from across the university in terms of colleges to participate in a pilot program for 2021. And if that succeeds and works well, then we will start to look at whether or not we can include that in our enterprise agreement as we go into the next round of bargaining. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks. We're about to run out of time, and we have 200 questions that are still there. So we're going to have to find a way to try to summarize and answer these things offline. And I appreciate everyone's questions coming in. One of the questions asked by Michael is, what is the mechanism to distribute the reduction in staff FTE across schools and admin units? Well, after this consultation period, I will be working with the various service division directors and the deans, but ultimately it is my job as Vice-Chancellor to work with the executive to distribute those in a way that allows the university to best meet its long-term strategic goals. There is no particularly easy way of a cut of this bit. There's no formulaic way to do it that is sensible. And so it will be done ultimately by the senior management group led by myself. Lachlan asks, earlier this year we were told that ANU was in a better position than most, but now it looks like we're facing almost as many job losses as UNSW, a much larger institution. Why has this changed so dramatically at ANU specifically? UNSW is spending 115 million in reserves. Why isn't ANU? So Lachlan, it is very difficult for me to truly understand what is going on at other universities and the decisions they're making. It's held fairly closely. We have spent a very large amount of our reserves. That is why you will see our reserves have dropped by several $100 million over the course of the year. So we are spending reserves. And with respect to why our job losses are as large as they are, we have, I guess, modeled what we think is happening. And what I am unsure of what decisions other universities are making, but it looks to me that other universities are intending to potentially look downstream at additional cuts as over time. I cannot tell. It's very difficult for me to reconcile with the numbers we have. I can only tell you with certainty what we're doing and why we're doing it, and I am trying as best I can to be brutally transparent with you. And so I think you will find our level of transparency will remain second to none in the sector. And Anna, do you want to add anything?
No, nothing further to add.
I might just add one thing, Brian. So there are a number of suggestions also in the Q&A around borrowings, reserves, and so forth. So I think it is just worth just reiterating, and again, this will be in the paper that you haven't seen yet, that this approach absolutely is a multi-pronged approach. So yes, there are position reductions, but there are also increases in debt. There's also the university and Finance Committee and Council have approved, subject to this consultation round, that they would be accepting of 3 more years of losses. So we're using more debt. We're actually looking at losses on the profit and loss statement. We've used reserves. We've looked at deferring capital. So we're pulling every possible lever that we can to avoid the size of the staff reductions. And so where we've got to is this 215 figure, which we think is unfortunately needed. But it's also in the plan. There are actually investments in things like the Below Zero program and greenhouse gas emissions. There's a new First Nations portfolio. There are investments in business development in research to try and build some of the other categories of research funding and so forth. So this is a reshaping of the university as much as a change in size. And so it is a multi-pronged strategy. And we're trying to use all the levers available, but trying not to pull any of them too hard, just to make sure that we actually have got some headroom should the situation gets worse over the next couple of years.
So I'm conscious that we are past our end time. So Paul, you're going to talk about the next steps going forward. And I note that there will be a website going live, and we will continue to answer your questions. And I'm hoping we have a way to capture the 229 questions that are there so that we can start trying to answer those. And Lou, do you have the ability to, just before we go that, do you have the ability to get that many questions? I know when there's small numbers, it's easier.
Yes, that's all done. Yep.
Okay, great.
No,
Paul, over to you.
thanks, Brian. So we are very sorry to be announcing this, and any announcement like this obviously builds uncertainty, and we fully understand that. There's no easy way to do it, and so we've come to you as quickly as we could after the council meeting. We're giving you what we think is a fair amount of time, 2 weeks, to give us the feedback on the overarching strategy. I know during that time people want to know what the impact is for them individually, but we can't actually finalise this plan until we have your feedback, otherwise that would be inauthentic. So we have 2 weeks of consultation and feedback by the 29th of September. We've then got a week to digest that and to put the finishing touches then on the information that will be available to you, specific information by each college, by each portfolio, by each school, by each division. So in the week commencing the 5th of October, you'll be receiving the information that talks about the likely impacts in your area. Then there'll be another round of consultation. So there's another opportunity for you to comment, not just on this broader strategy now, but then ultimately on the impacts in your local area. And then those change plans will be finalised and announced. So there are plenty of opportunities now over the next month to contribute. It does mean that it is an open question for a bit longer, but we think that's the right thing to do as far as consulting with you is concerned. We'll capture all these Q&A questions. We'll answer as many of them as we're able to. The website will be live from 2:30, and we look forward to consulting with you more over the coming weeks.